What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Happy Monday night. Football. The Miami Dolphins bail out the state of Florida that would have been winless in college and pro football, but Mike McDaniel, Tua Tagovailoa, and honestly, the Miami Dolphin defense come through, do not allow the Rams to score a touchdown, win 23-15. So we will dive into this game. Rams, they're having some offensive issues. I mean, they got everybody back, but when you look at these last two games, it's not going to be easy to make. We can say the AFC is a lot better than the NFC, but you're not getting into the NFC playoffs with 9 wins. Like, you're going to have to get to 10, and this was a pretty devastating loss when you look at the big picture for McVay and the Rams with a healthy team. We also, as we do on every Monday night, little Penthouse and Outhouse. Obviously, there's just a couple teams hanging out in that Penthouse. And the Outhouse, yeah, I might have to take the Port-a-Potty Panthers out. I mean, they might have bounced because they're winning some games. 2-game winning streak for the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young, but there are some other teams. Woo-wee. And something hit me today that we've seen because, you know, when you look at this coaching cycle, a lot of teams are going to have job openings. Is there a college coach that could make the jump? So I want to throw out some names, then we'll hit on some other NFL stuff as well. But before we dive in to the Monday night game, you know I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast. Celebrities everywhere there tonight. There were a lot of famous people there. There's a lot of people. I went to that stadium. I think it's badass. I think it's the coolest place I've ever been. I don't know how awesome it is for the teams, especially the Rams and the Chargers, given that it often feels like an away game for them. But the actual stadium, the setup, it's just really cool. It's very futuristic. There's not some crazy light coming out of nowhere like at Jerry's World. But if you ever get the opportunity to go to SoFi, to a concert, to an event, to a football game, I would highly recommend it. If you want to go to any game, you want to go to a college game, a pro game, any sport, concerts, go enjoy yourself, get out of the house. The holidays are right around the corner. Last year for my brother and his wife for Christmas, I got them a pair of tickets to go to a concert. And they were very happy. And they love me a lot because of it. And you can do the same. Just use Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, your boy had the Rams tonight, and I even bought a half point and had them -3. And I knew early on I was in major trouble. The Rams offense looked awful. And going to look back at the Seattle game last week, they weren't that much better. They had 20 points heading into overtime. They only scored 1 offensive touchdown last week. Remember, the second touchdown came on a Geno pick 6. So in the last 2 games, with everyone back, Matt Stafford, who just a couple weeks ago were like, God, this guy's a top 5 quarterback. Puka's healthy. Cooper's healthy. Their running back's good. They're getting offensive linemen back. They have Sean freaking McVay calling their plays. Their offense looks awful. I mean, tonight was a pretty rough night for Sean McVay. Part of the reason I hammered them, it was like Monday Night Football at home against one of his buddies. Obviously, the Dolphins, you can't judge them. Like, they weren't the shitty version that when Tua wasn't playing. I mean, that wasn't even an NFL team. When he comes back, you know, they're like I thought they would be. 7-8 win team, feisty, good indoors, bad outdoors, inclement weather. Like, there's a good spot for them. But defensively, I do not view them as good. And tonight, the Rams, with firepower everywhere, could not score an offensive touchdown. This was a pretty devastating loss for Sean McVay because all the injuries they had early in the season Like last year, they found themselves behind the eight ball, and now they're 4-5. And when you look around the playoff picture, you go, well, the Eagles, who have 8 wins, play the Commanders, who have 7 wins. Those two teams are going to be in the playoffs. The Detroit Lions are going to be in the playoffs. The Green Bay Packers are going to be in the playoffs. I don't know what to think about Minnesota, but they got 7 wins. Obviously, Atlanta doesn't matter. They're just going to win their division. But you also got the Arizona Cardinals, who are playing really well and beat the shit out of the Rams earlier in the season, are 6-4. And now the 49ers get McCaffrey back. And today, Dre Greenlaw started to practice, or his window opened up. So it's like they're not going to go away. Like this is a tough spot for the Rams to lose this game. It was going to be hard regardless. Once you get yourself in that tough spot, you got to, kind of climb your way out of the hole. But you can't be losing at home as a favorite on Monday Night Football to a team that, like I said, 2-6 doesn't really represent, like they're not a god awful squad, but the Rams should be better than them. And I thought they got work tonight. And I thought McVay against a first year defensive coordinator who it wasn't that long ago he was a player, kind of kicked their ass. I mean, Stafford was under siege all night long. They were awful on third down. They could get no rhythm passing the ball. This is 2 weeks in a row they've struggled to run the ball. So there's no balance to their offense. And I think sometimes Sean McVay, he gets so directly kind of tied and correlated with Kyle and even LaFleur. Of the three guys, he by far will be the quickest to, I'm just going to go pass happy. I'm just going to pass the ball. And tonight it's like 17-6, and he'll start slinging it around, like he's down 30 points, which, again, most coaches historically in football, especially in the internet age, are wired to pass. And they got Matt Stafford and they got two really good wide receivers. But when your offense isn't clicking, like, keep hammering that run game. Like that back can bust a 20-yard run at any moment. And I think he kind of gets away from it quick. And tonight they were struggling to block. Weaver kind of had him timed on pressures. And it was just not good. I mean, Stafford, even when he wasn't sacked, I think he was sacked 4 times. That's what I wrote down, but he might have been sacked again toward the end of the game. Yeah, he was sacked 4 times. Felt like he was pressured a bunch and just did not play that well. I mean, period, point blank, end of story. And this is a guy a couple weeks ago, you're like, God, they get hot to get these receivers back. This is a 10-win team. And you watch him today, and even if you watched him a lot in that Seattle game, it's like, something's weird. Like it just doesn't quite look the same. And what's crazy about the Rams is I read this article on The Athletic about Chris Shula, who's a longtime good friend of McVay. They played college football together, who's the grandson of Don Shula. His uncle, I think, was Mike, who coached Alabama, coached in the NFL forever. His dad also coached in the NFL. Then I think in the late 90s just went to run the Shula, the companies and obviously the steakhouses that you guys down in the South know. We don't really, I've never seen them out West, but obviously they have a big, booming business and they're a football family and kind of got a shot. And you could tell the way McVay's talked about it, and even in the article, that it was tough because they were so close. He wasn't going to hand him the job, and he gave it to him based on merit, and he's been awesome. I mean, honestly, you remove that Arizona game, which, let's face it, if you're a little off and you play this Cardinal team, they can throw up some points on you. They have a bunch of young players. I mean, Jared Verse, that stat that he's their first round pick in 7 years. I mean, it makes sense because we know about the trade they made for Jared Goff and the trade they made for Jalen Ramsey and just the trades they've made over the years for different players. I'm probably forgetting, was it Brandon Cooks or was it Sammy Watkins? There's a lot of players mixed in there, but that's approaching a decade without a first round pick. And again, well worth it. Obviously, then trading for Matt Stafford as well. That dude's a baller. It's pretty crazy that Jared Verse fell to 19. Like, there is zero chance in this world in 5 years there will be 10 players drafted above him that are even close to as good as him. If I was a betting man right now, I'd say 5 or 6 that in 5 years you feel good are, yeah, we're glad we picked this guy over Jared Verse. I mean, that's aging pretty well for the Rams because he is a monster. But when your defense plays that well, like, listen, Hill's healthy, Waddle's flying around. Tua, while he'll throw you the ball, still makes, enough plays to keep you on your toes. Achane's just dynamic. I mean, Mozart at any moment can run like 90 miles an hour. It's a tough defense to play, especially indoors. I mean, that team is not built to play in the AFC against the Ravens, against the Bills, and against the Chiefs in freezing cold weather. I mean, that franchise isn't. They have a long history of just shitting the bed in cold. Understandable. I live in Scottsdale. It gets 60 degrees. I'm freezing my ass off. It's human nature. But you put that team with that coach and those weapons in a dome, scary to play. I mean, that's especially on a long week. And listen, I'm not, I think Mike McDaniel is overrated. No one's ever disputed he's a good offensive X's and O's guys. And Shula went toe to toe with him. Tua barely threw for 200 yards. Picked him off once, forced a fumble, could have picked him off again. The dude that had the pick early in the game dove in a ball, hit off his hands. So your defense is balling, and your offense, which I think Cooper Kupp's one of the highest paid wide receivers in the league on a per year basis. Matt Stafford is obviously very, very highly paid. And your coach is a $16, $17 million offensive coordinator. And honestly, he's proven to be one of the better ones over the stretch of the course of his career. And tonight he got punked on Monday Night Football against a team that's not sniffing the playoffs. That's tough. And this is where these Monday night games are just weird because, like, at the end of the day, what are the Dolphins going to win? 6, 7 games. Now that Tua's back, like they're going to be not even close to a playoff team. But like you get them in a primetime spot, like it's a big deal. These people are humans. Like your record kind of goes out the window to me in Monday night games in November and December. And I think they're scary for good teams. And honestly, I thought the Rams were good coming into tonight. I gotta pull back a little bit. I don't think they're bad, but I don't view them the same after the last couple weeks. I mean, Gino handed them an overtime appearance last week, and tonight was bad. Tonight was rough. At home, just the Dolphins defense looking like, the 2001 Ravens against you or something. It's crazy to see. Not being able to score one touchdown with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kieran Williams, Matt Stafford, and Sean McVay calling the play. It's just crazy to me. It really is. And honestly, it didn't even feel like they were getting close. I mean, they were forced to kick long field goals. It's not like, well, they had to settle again for a 7-yard field goal. It's like, no, they're kicking like 50, 55-yard field goals. I mean, what are the distances of the field goals they kicked tonight? Like, they were long. Let me pull up my man who was 5 of 6. His long was 55. I mean, it's just that's Sean McVay's not going to sleep well tonight. He's really not. Yeah, I'm just kind of shocked what I saw, especially with, I think 2 years ago when they kind of, especially Aaron Donald retires last year or last off season or whatever. So this is first year gone. You're just like, their defense, and you're watching them. You're like, God, I like all these players. I really do. They tackle well. They hit well. Whoever the next Jets head coach is, I was thinking this tonight when Jalen Ramsey made a sweet open field tackle. The first thing I would do, if it's Rex Ryan, whoever it is, I am showing Jalen Ramsey and Richard Sherman open field tackle. I mean, I'm having my quality control guy just set up reel after reel, and Sauce Gardner is going to study those tapes. Because, Sauce Gardner, who's had an atrocious season for, a hyped up player, if you're going to be a big, long corner, like you got to play like that. I mean, Jalen Ramsey and Richard Sherman, I mean, I want my tall, long corners to hit. One thing I've always respected about Jalen is Jalen will fuck you up. I mean, and listen, a lot of corners won't. But if you're going to have these 6'2", 6'3" long corners, like I like them to turn into safeties at a moment's notice. I'm watching Sauce Gardner the other day fall off tackles left and right, but kind of clicked into me tonight. If whoever the next head coach is, that would be one of my first moves. But other than that, man, Yeah, rough L. The NFL season is rolling along, and contenders are starting to separate from the pack. But one thing has not changed, and that's DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And it's the number one place to do what I love to do, bet some touchdowns. Whether it's a fade, whether it's a Hail Mary, whether it's a sweep where 3 tackles are broken and a dude goes 60 yards, we do not care. Because we love to bet touchdowns, and DraftKings is the place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting something as simple as scoring a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your first pick. And here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get 200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N. That's code JOHN for new customers to get 200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Okay, let's this won't take too long. The Penthouse and the Outhouse. You know, my fiance Maria just joined a new brokerage. Brokerage, I think. I'm not a real estate guy. She joined a new real estate agency. They're a big luxury brand, and they do pretty well. Let's just say. So it's a very awesome opportunity for her. And tomorrow night, they're having an open house, and the home is $29 million. And if it sells at $29 million, it'll be the second highest per square foot house in the history of the state. We're getting a lot of these, smart people fleeing California coming here. It's driving up the price a little bit. Not that I could buy the house, but someone will. And I was thinking about my buddies on the Chiefs, just how well they're living. And I just saw that Kelsey built this mansion in Kansas City, and his mansion was like $7 million. It's got like an underground, obviously depending on where you live, the mansions cost a little bit different. One, having a mansion, depending on how many people lived at your house. I remember hearing 50 Cent, I think, talk about this one time. He bought, I think, a mansion from either Mike Tyson or Holyfield. And he's like, bro, it's kind of scary. You look down a hall. It's pitch black. It's like as long as a football field. You didn't know if you needed to bring like an AK with you just to go grab, a cold water in the middle of the night. You just had no fucking houses like an army barracks. And I just think the Chiefs, it just doesn't get any better. Like it's impossible to live any better than they're living right now. Because even you're playing in these close games, no one ever thinks you're going to lose. And you just don't lose. You just cannot lose. Yesterday, I read today that the dude, Leo Chanel, that Patrick Mahomes claims that they call him John Cena. And they showed a clip at the parade. He jumped up on the bus and pulled him up. He's obviously a big time freak athlete, very strong. And he looked at Spags and was like, do you want us to let them score? And Spags said no. And granted, if they had, someone probably would have fallen down to the 10-yard line. So it wouldn't have mattered either. But he said, no, we're going to play defense. And obviously they blocked that field goal. It's just, I read an article today that they've already had more close wins by week 10 than the 07 Patriots had all season long. So they are just living. This is the best possible life you can have as a football fan. This is like the peak of the Saban dynasty if you're an Alabama fan. It's as good as it gets. It's like you can't, if you were a human, it's like Bezos or Elon, you don't get any richer. So when you see all these people like Bears fans and just all the shitty teams fans just around the league who are just miserable, you're completely opposite. It's just a great way to live. And that's the difference of you and Detroit, because you guys have lived pretty well for a while. Even before Mahomes got there, you were a real team competing for the playoffs. Detroit has entered that chat after 30 years of being the biggest joke organization, arguably in all of sports, or right up there with anybody. And now they're just like your neighbors. They're like, hey, what's up, man? How's it going? What are you up to today? Nothing. Just looking at the bank account, living a good life. He throws 5 interceptions. They're down 23-7.5 on the road on a game that no one been they lost, whatever. They'll still end up with, 14 wins. No, we're going to win. And then after Dan Campbell's post games are always going viral. Schefter's Instagramming it to, out to the world. Other people are forwarding it to all over the place. You see it like 17 different places. Life's good, man. Like, you're cool. You guys are cool. Think about that. You guys are cool. Like, if you're a Chiefs fan, you're like, we've kind of been cool since Andy got here. We've gotten really cool since Mahomes started playing. But even those couple years before, you had like Alex with Tyreek and Kelsey. It was a really fun team. It's like the Lions are just now like the equal. And it's like, oh, yeah, Jared Goff's our quarterback. And it's that cool. It's crazy how fast that happened. I do think, and they're the only two teams in it right now. Like, we'll see this. Whoever wins the Steeler Ravens game, I'll put you in there. Josh Allen just threw a couple picks. That game, weird game against Indianapolis. Green Bay off week. Eagles, you win this week, you'll be in there as well. I mean, you're beating the shit out of Jerry Jones and his shitty squad. But I just right now there are two teams. And other two teams, three or four teams could enter the chat here in the next couple of weeks. But I think they belong by themselves right now. I do think we have to remove the Port-a-Potty Panthers because they deserved the Port-a-Potty label. It was really bad, and it smelled in there. It was disgusting. It didn't get any worse. It was as bad as you get. Sometimes too, if like the latch doesn't work and you're stuck, and it really smells, and it's like that, that toilet paper is in the porta potty, and someone has taken a dump over it, and you just feel stuck, and it's just disgusting. Well, they got their way. They're out. Not that they're good. They're still bad, but you win games. You take out people, like, you deserve to get out. But if they beat you in Germany and your quarterback makes $40 million a year, you have to replace them. So the Giants are now the porta potty, like I said, with all the toilet paper that's like probably like 3 or 4 feet high, and then there are just several dumps on top. That to me is the New York Giants right now. And you could argue the Cowboys are every bit their equal. And remember, they played in a close game like 3 weeks ago, and that's when Dak was playing. So you could argue the Giants and the Cowboys, there is no difference. Coward thinks the Cowboys are the worst team in the league, this version that we're watching right now. Hard to dispute. I mean, they suck pretty bad. It's crazy that this team is also in that big pile of shit, but it's hard to take the Bears seriously. They scored 3 points against the New England Patriots at home. 3 points. They had the number 1 overall pick. They took a fucking quarterback who was supposed to be a generational talent. I do think, and listen, I would have taken him number 1 too. I think I said this at the time, so I'm not trying to act like, 6 months later, I'm changing my tune. To be a generational talent, I do think you need size as well, right? To me, you watch Josh Allen, generational talent. Andrew Luck was a generational talent. They also got to be huge. Caleb's a little short to just be considered. How many tiny little guys are considered generational talents? So I think we overuse that term. He's a very talented player who looks awful, but they took a hyped player. And he's like got to be one of, if not the worst quarterback in the league over the last couple of weeks. They took a wide receiver at 9. They traded for another wide receiver. They can't score a point. It's crazy. How can you not move the ball? I think they had one drive over like 21 yards against the New England Patriots, not the Belichick 2015 version. I feel for Bears fans, man. It's pretty bad. I never would have thought. I thought you guys were a little overhyped after you won some of those games, but I never thought you'd be in the outhouse, with teams like the Port-a-Potty Panthers that are still roaming around, but they're not stuck in the toilet area with the Giants, Cowboys, and Bears. It's hard. The AFC, I actually think the Titans, I know they have a bad record, but you watch them, they're a feisty team. Jacksonville, it's hard to even talk about Jacksonville. Mac Jones, my guy Doug, who's one of the nicest guys in the league. I think he's starting to break a little bit. They asked him after the game because the game ended on a Mac Jones interception. I think they were down 12-7. I mean, had to be probably top 2 or 3 ugliest games of the entire year. up to this point, and even when the season ends, it'll probably be a lock top three ugly game that no one will ever talk about or watch again. The game ends on Mac Jones. The last drive overthrows a guy by 20 yards, and the press asked Doug, like, what was the plan on that play? And Doug's getting snippy now, and he's like, even if I told you guys, you wouldn't understand. We'll just go back and look at the film. I'm like, oh, this is getting ugly. But that's what happens when you roll out Mac Jones. I don't think you could beat like Georgia or Tennessee. But speaking of college, the other thing is, sometimes I was thinking about this today. Like when I was with the Eagles and Andy got fired, we hired Chip Kelly from Oregon. And the reason they hired Chip Kelly is because Bill O'Brien had turned them down. So a coach for the Eagles was basically coming from college. And over the course of, I would say, the last 20 years, right, we saw Pete Carroll leave USC. We saw Urban Meyer. I think he was out of the league or college for a year, go to Jacksonville. We've seen it happen. And historically, we've seen it happen a lot. When you look around the crop of guys, assuming Ben Johnson will leave, and I don't think there's any lock. I mean, he's turned down jobs. Then there's the crew of like Liam Cohen's, Slowik's, Belichick's a wild card, Mike Vrabel. Could there be a college coach that we're not talking about that makes the leap to the pros? And I was thinking, Georgia plays Tennessee this week. And if Tennessee, it's games at Georgia, so I'm going to assume Georgia's going to win. But if they were to lose, like they will not make the playoffs. And Kirby's already won a couple national championships. He's complained a lot like this. And listen, I mean, these are first class problems, but it used to be a lot easier for him. He could buy the players under the table, stack his team, and kick the shit out of everybody beside Nick Saban. And now with the NIL transfer portal, even though he can still has a lot of money and can buy players, guys leave when they're not starting. It's a pain in his ass. And it's just not as easy. So if you're going to compete at the highest level, wouldn't you entertain? And listen, I don't know if it would work. I'm pretty sure he's only coached in the pros for a couple years when he was with Saban, I think at Miami. But I could see, because people have talked about it before, the scouting community loves the guy. Just a tough, old school guy. He coached in the NFL for 1 year. So that's something that I'm always apprehensive about. I'm not saying it would be easy. I'm not even saying it would be a good hire. But I could see Kirby being interested in putting it out. Yeah, I'm willing to talk. Now, would someone be interested? I don't know. I think the other wild card would be Lane Kiffin. Once Florida announces that they're bringing back Billy Napier, which how funny was that? They announced that. And I think they were down, was it 35-6 at halftime at Texas? Nothing like announcing to your fan base, our coach will return. And then in the first half being down about 100 points. But that happened. And it's like Lane's done a good job at Ole Miss. If they win out, they're going to go to the playoffs. He's had a fantastic run. But is he just going to coach the rest of his life at Ole Miss? I know he makes a lot of money and they got good NIL, but to me, he would love to go to a bigger job. And I don't know if that bigger job really exists right now. So, I mean, he comes from a long line of NFL guys. I mean, his dad's one of the most famous defensive coordinators ever. I just think I would have to imagine he'd be interested. Now, people have to be interested back. Would a GM want to work with him? I definitely think he's mellowed out with time and age, but I just think he's a guy to keep an eye on that would be interested. And if you saw Lane Kiffin has interviewed with so-and-so team, I think it's pretty believable. I think two guys that their names have been floated out in the past that are in a no-go zone. For a long period of time, people viewed Brian Kelly as a guy that this would work in the NFL. I don't think any guy has hurt his stock the last couple of years. One guy has more, but I always thought Brian Kelly was really impressive at Notre Dame. It turns out Notre Dame fucking plays nobody. Their schedule's a joke. And he ran a good program. He recruited well, but anytime he played a real team, you never bet on the guy. And what we witnessed the other night at Alabama was I mean, is he going to keep his job at LSU for 2 or 3 more years? If that keeps happening, no, he will not. And the other guy, and you're going to hear this name, and I think you would have heard it way more if they would have had success, is Caleb Williams needs a coach. How about Lincoln Riley? You could not hire Lincoln Riley in the NFL. I mean, I don't. If USC could do it over again, they wouldn't hire him at USC. So it's just crazy how fast things change, and that's where in college football, when your name gets in the cycle and you have it, you got to pounce because Lincoln could have got an NFL job 3 years ago, no problem. Remember Pat Fitzgerald? It was like everyone's interested in Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. Now he wasn't that interested in the NFL. But then eventually that weird stuff happens. He gets fired and he's just out of coaching. Right? Remember Purdy's guy? What the hell's his name? Matt Campbell at Iowa State. It was like, yeah, it's not just USC and like Texas are interested. Like NFL teams are sniffing around. It's like, man, if you can get a job, you got to pounce. Because I'm at a bar on Saturday after lunch, just having a midday cocktail, nothing too crazy. Look up and Kansas is beating the shit out of Iowa State at Arrowhead. I'm like, damn, this team was undefeated 2 weeks ago, and now they're going the wrong way. So things change really, really fast in football. So to me, the two names that would not shock me if they interviewed, I'm not saying they're going to get jobs, but I could see GMs, ownership, front offices talk about these two guys would be definitely Lane. But I think keep an eye on Kirby Smart. Can I tell you about my friends at Via? Via is known for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies. Here's the thing. I can easily just go CBD only or a little THC. And the best part about Via is you can control what you like. If you want 100 milligrams with THC, easy to use. If you want no THC and just CBD, also very easy. They sent me these sleep gummies. They call Dreams. And they have 5 milligrams of THC and 5 milligrams of CBD. I take a little before I go to bed, sleep like a baby. They also have a focus one, a relief one. The focus one actually works pretty good. I need to get up, grind out a little tape, read some stories on the NFL, use one of those, and I'm off and running. Via lets you control what you want in your product. Industry leader, over 500,000 people served. Made in the USA. They have experience, top-notch customer support. Cannot recommend them enough. Sourced from the finest hemp for your peace of mind. Trust me, after using this stuff, it's fantastic. If you're 21 or over, check out the link to Via in our description. Use the code JOHN to receive 15% off. And after your purchase, when they ask you where you heard about them from, please support the show and tell them we sent you. This fall, enhance your everyday with Via. I was thinking about this today because obviously there's a lot of discussion out there on the streets about the Chicago Bears. And I was having lunch after a good little morning sweat. I guess it wasn't too early in the morning because it was lunchtime. But I was reading Mike Sando's article that he puts out every single week on The Athletic. And he usually talks to executives and coaches that give him pretty good quotes. And, the Bears, Eberflus being a dead man walking, the regression of Caleb Williams, and the ultimate just embarrassment, which is their franchise, especially offensively, given how much hype was behind this team, has been something I didn't quite expect it to quite, like most people, get this ugly. It's been really bad. And there are a lot of different elements to this, but I think there's something that not many people are talking about. And I was thinking about, like, when I was a kid, the boss in my house, it was very clear, was my father. When I got in trouble and he wasn't around, it was immediately relayed to me, you better be ready because I'm going to call your father. I will talk to your dad. And that usually changed it. Like most people in a home, like, there's a hierarchy. And exactly every single person in that home knows who to answer for. I would say any successful business, when I was part of football teams, when I was at Fresno State, was very clear who was in charge. His name was Pat Hill. When I was with the Eagles, same thing. Andy Reid. And directly for me, Howie Roseman. Like, there wasn't like this guy, this baby guy, you got to answer that. No, it was very clearly defined. And I think most people agree wherever you work or if you're raising children, there has to be some sort of like the buck stops somewhere. And one quote in the article about the Bears was, this is an unnamed executive, have a hard time seeing Kevin Warren hire a big name proven head coach. And for those of you that don't know, is Kevin Warren, for my money, is the disgraced Big Ten commissioner who tried to shut down football back in 2020 and now runs the Bears. And like basically every franchise in pro sports, is in charge of the business operation. And for a team like the Bears, he's in the pursuit of getting a new stadium. Very understandable. Normal role. But something stood out to me in Hard Knocks. When Ryan Poles signed DJ Moore to an extension, it was like in the third or fourth episode. When he was going over the contract, he wasn't doing it with the owner. He was doing it with Kevin Warren. So in the franchise in Chicago, if the head coach or GM wants to do something regarding their team with money, they don't go to the owner. They have to get the okay from a guy who does not sign their checks, a guy who does not own the team, who's essentially a highly paid intermediary. And listen, that's not abnormal in some industries, but in football, I would say that's a problem. Andy Reid and Brett Veach, if they need to get something done, there's one person they talk to. And that's the guy at the top of the food chain, the owner of the franchise. If Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch want to get something done, love Al Guido. He's the man. Just like Donovan in Kansas City. A lot of presidents, high-level guys. The coach and the GM do not need to go through them when it comes to contracts, when it comes to trades, when it comes to football-related matters. Howie Roseman doesn't go to Don Smolinski, another great guy, when he needs to get something football-wise done. He goes to Jeffrey Lurie. So you could argue the Bears, their home is all out of whack because the ownership, which clearly is more than questionable, they've had the team for a long, long time. I think it's fair to say don't really know what they're doing. A little archaic in their practices. Have this guy who, listen, totally understand hiring someone to run point on something serious like this. When I was in the Bay Area, the 49ers did the same thing. You hire business people to take on a stadium. That is very important. That person does not need to be briefed on the contract details of your wide receiver. And if they are, that's very telling. So we can blame Eberflus. Clearly, he's over his head. We can blame Shane Waldron. Obviously, he's not a very good offensive coordinator. We could blame Caleb. Not playing very well. Looks completely lost. As Sam Darnold once famously said, seeing ghosts and running into sacks. Was sacked 9 times against the Patriots. 9 times. This was a franchise that up till November 10th, at least in the morning of November 10th, had 16 sacks on the season. So they're not exactly coming at you with Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White off the edges. And listen, if you watch a breakdown of his sacks, some of them are on him. You don't get sacked 9 times, it's all on the offensive line. And obviously their offensive line has not played well. But Caleb is not playing well, and they got a lot of different factors. But if they're going to move on and get their shit together, it is very, very difficult to operate with a guy like Kevin Warren, who's essentially in charge of football. That's who Ryan Poles answers to. That's who the head coach answers to. If I'm a Bears fan, that can't be allowed. And as long as it is allowed, you got no shot. None. You are not going to be able to compete with the Detroit Lions and Holmes and Dan Campbell. You are not going to be able to compete with Gutekunst and LaFleur. It's not going to happen. Now, you could argue, well, Murphy played somewhat of a role like Kevin Warren did with the Packers. They don't have an owner. So it's kind of a unique situation. Who do you think Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi are answering to when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings? We know, the owner. And meanwhile, in Chicago, a franchise that finally was like, okay, they might be real now. Maybe they'll eventually beat the Packers. Nope. Because their owner is a guy that doesn't even actually own the team. At least the one that the head coach and the GM are going to answer to. And this is going to be a problem this offseason. I promise you it will. When Eberflus, that entire staff gets blown out, the number one thing every coach is going to ask about when they're being interviewed is like, who do I answer to? Who is my responsibility beholden to? Who, when I have an issue, do I go to? Because my friends in the league that have these jobs, they answer to one human. And it's the guy that his entire franchise is under his name. If I'm not answering to that guy when I have questions or I have concerns and I have to go through essentially a middleman, we got fucking problems. So I think if you're a Bears fan right now, like, we got to figure out this Kevin Warren situation. He's not the reason you just got your ass kicked in New England. I'm not putting the season on him, but from a big picture structural operation, it's a problem. And you're not going to be able to hire anybody, especially if he's unwilling to, because he wants some more of a puppet. And because that's the budget that he's allowing, because he's in control of the money, it's going to have issues. Like we just saw this, in Atlanta. Rich McKay, the general manager, they didn't want to bring in Belichick. So they went with Raheem Morris. Really good coach, high-level guy. But, like, it does limit your pool. And the Bears obviously aren't ever fishing off the deep end of the pier because they're kind of cheap. And then you have this guy that's like in this, I'm not a big mystery role guy, right? Like what's exactly, well, his title is the president, but we got to go through him for contracts. And if we want to make a big trade, he okays it. So he's not just the business president. He's essentially the CEO of the company. But they never want to put that on them. Why? Because when you lose, they don't want to take any responsibility. It's why if you look around the best teams in the league, the president is an essential role for all these teams. He's making millions of dollars with most operations. But like Eric DaCosta and John Harbaugh, the first thing they do is don't go to the president of the team. They have a major problem, a major question. They call the owner. So I would say this, Chicago, it sucks. I mean, it really does. Seeing some of the stats, I didn't quite realize because I had it on a 4-box, just truly how bad it was. As a buddy told me today at the gym, 43 yards passing at halftime. I don't think they had to drive over 25 yards. I mean, it just doesn't get any uglier. 3 points in an NFL game in 2024. That's difficult. That's really difficult. And I just think they got some big picture issues with the setup of the operation. And I don't know how that changes as long as Kevin Warren's in the building. I do think the Colts, when you take a project, we talked about this with Anthony Richardson within the last couple weeks, right? When they originally drafted him, when they started playing him, when they benched him, it is difficult to deal with projects when you have expectations. Like Drake May, can he play winning football right now? I don't truly know, right? Like, could you put him on a good team and compete to make the playoffs? I watched him yesterday. I've watched him the last couple weeks. I like what I see. He clearly is very gifted, as me and Colin talked about. The comps of Justin Herbert seems like just a positive, uplifting human being. Easy guy to root for. Is he going to be a winning player? I don't know. But the best part of being just a project, a guy with no expectations on a shitty team, doesn't matter. Make some plays here and there and everyone loves you. But when you're in Anthony Richardson's situation and you're a project, but you're on a team that like their expectations to win 10 plus games and be playing the first weekend of the playoffs. And I mean, honestly, to compete to win the division. So to have a home game the first weekend of the playoffs. Once you bench the guy, and this is what we talk about a lot with coordinators, because obviously, listen, I think Liam Cohen with Tampa, and they've lost 2 games in a row. I think the guy's doing a fucking phenomenal job. That guy's impressive. The Gannon's crew, his defensive and offensive coordinator, kicking ass. Obviously, Ben Johnson has been phenomenal. Kingsbury's been awesome. Look at what Arthur Smith is doing in Pittsburgh. Now, Arthur Smith's been a head coach before, but you just never know until I put you in the lead seat how you handle these things. Because like you don't have to, it's not your call as an offensive coordinator who gets benched and who plays. It's on the head coach, the owner, and the general manager. And in Chicago, Kevin Warren. But in Indy, like Shane Steichen, it wasn't his job to be like, we bench Carson Wentz. We go with Jalen Hurts. We bench this player. He obviously gives his input to Sirianni and Howie, but it's not his decision. And when he had to make this decision, along with Chris Ballard, to do this Joe Flacco move, which was understandable, totally get it. But when you make that move, you kind of need to win. And the 49ers, why they avoided, people never, like you see this sometimes on the internet, like, how did this team avoid criticism? I don't know. They went to 3 straight conference championships with him playing 4 games. Like, yes, it was a disaster losing out on those picks. And if they could do it over again, of course they wouldn't have made the trade and drafted the player. But they did. And they continued to win. Hell, this year for the 49ers has been one of the craziest seasons I've ever seen. You got their long snapper popping off when their kicker is being told by one of their star players just to lock in. Debo had to give him a little choke slam to quiet him up, which I completely support Debo, like the long snapper. Keep your mouth shut. No one wants to hear from you. You're like a little kid on Thanksgiving little kid table. Just sit over there, enjoy your food, and be glad you got invited. Because no one needs to hear a peep, especially with something as innocuous as like lock in after you're missing some field goals. It wasn't even directed at you. You're not the coach, thank God, because your unit's a joke, an abomination relative to the rest of the NFL. But the 49ers win. So they have handled the disastrous move they made for a major project who's not nearly as talented as Anthony Richardson. I mean, hell, he can't even play in Dallas. But Indy's not winning. And Joe Flacco the last 2 weeks has not been that good. I mean, yesterday, if I told you going into the Colts game, if you're a Colts fan, Josh Allen is not going to throw for a touchdown and he's going to throw 2 interceptions, you'd be like, listen, I'd like our chances. You were never really in the game. Flacco threw 3 picks. Doesn't quite look like he has the same magic as he did last year. And maybe it was. I mean, Cleveland last year at the same time was a better team. I would say Cleveland had more talent. But when you make that move, which totally supported and totally understood why you made it, once you lose, it becomes kind of controversial. It's like, is this right? Does this guy know what he's doing? And it also puts the microscope on you. And I do think this team has been pretty polarizing by a lot of people in the league because people think like this team doesn't actually win that much. It's not like they go to the playoffs ever. I mean, when's the last time they've been to the playoffs? The year with Phillip Rivers when they were 1 and done? This is a team where their general manager has got a lot of friends in the NFL, or excuse me, in the media, and he's highly thought of. And listen, I think overall he's done a pretty good job, but at the end of the day, your job is ultimately defined by winning and losing on Sundays. And right now the Colts are 4-6, and they play the Jets this week in New York. Then they play the Lions. Then they go on the road in New England. Then they go on the road in Denver. So when you're 4-6, even if you just go 2-2 in these next 2 games, we're talking about a team that's what, 6-8? That while you end with the Titans, Giants, and Jags, your margin for error would basically be 0. You would have to run the table to go 9-8, and that doesn't even guarantee you a playoff spot. I have a hard time seeing them with their current situation of Flacco, or they go back to Anthony Richardson, going 3-1 in that stretch. Like the way Flacco is playing, they're no lock to just go on the road and win at New England. I definitely think they lose to the Lions and lose to the Broncos. So best case, like I said, is 2-2, and that means they would have to sweep those last 3 games to get to 9-8, and they probably wouldn't even control their own destiny. But I do think you're going to really start feeling the heat of just like, what's the plan here? Because if you are going to take a step back and quote unquote stunt his growth, and who knows if he'd even have the capability of growing after the player we watched early this season. But once you don't win, it becomes a problem. And that's the best part to me about pro sports It's like it's very black and white. And only the elite of the elites get to talk about the process. Said it all the time. Like you can if you're average, no one cares about your process. Nick Saban could make a living off selling his process because he won national championships all the time. I want to know how Jeff Bezos goes about his business. Why? Because he's successful. So, like Shane Steichen, this ain't really working. Not working at all. And if you end up going 7-10, and all of a sudden you go into an offseason of like, we don't even know what we have at quarterback going into year 3, you got a major problem at hand. This is one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life. And anyone that's lived in a big city, I think, especially as a single person, can relate to this. But I want to go to Darren Rizzi, who congrats to the New Orleans Saints, who snapped a 7-game losing streak. And because they're so shitty this year, the rivalry doesn't quite feel the same. But I would say for a lot of Sean Payton's tenure with Drew Brees and Matt Ryan, I'm not a huge NFC South guy, but that game was always really cool. Saints, Falcons, division games, they get weird. But Darren Rizzi and Derek Carr take out the classic interim coach boost. But he told a story after the game about how his day started, and it's pretty classic. Let's just take a quick listen to Darren Rizzi.
This is how my day started. I get down here to the stadium, I get down here to Superdome, I go in the head coach's locker room, which I've never used before, right? So here I am early in the morning, I go to the bathroom, and this is how my day started. I clogged the toilet. And I'm like, this is going to be a crappy day, pun intended. And so we listen. I'm like, okay, this is not really a great start to the day. Here we go. And so, I'm not really feeling like a head coach of an NFL team right now. So, so I'm like, really? This is really how we're going to start my day? So, but listen, there was moments during the game. I'm so wrapped up in my routine. There was moments today where like I'm almost forgetting. I'm just going through my routine, and I'm kind of forgetting that I'm the head coach a couple times.
Do you know what this reminds me of? And anyone who's lived in a big city, like a New York, a Chicago, a San Francisco, in your 20s, and you're single, so you date. Well, there are a lot of people living in older buildings. And in some of those buildings, especially if you have a one-bedroom apartment, sometimes the bathrooms feel like they're basically in the living room. And I know at least in San Francisco, there were rarely fans in the bathroom. So if you don't know someone that well and you're going over to their place for the first time, or even if they're coming over to your place the first time, you kind of hear everything that's going on. And I would say the worst nightmare of any human being would be to clog a toilet over someone that you are just started dating. Like it'd be a pretty embarrassing move. And it was always something that gave me the scaries in the back of my head. And sometimes you can't control it. You're like over there, like I gotta go to the bathroom, and then there's no fan. You're like turning on the sink. You're like, I hope I'm not echoing throughout the whole building. But this football coach, who I can't even imagine, who gets the interim tag, and anytime you get the interim tag, it's an opportunity to really put yourself on the map. Not necessarily to get the full-time job. I doubt he's going to get it. And I just think, though, a lot of people take notice. It changed Dan Campbell's career. He ended up going to work for Sean Payton. Rich Bisaccia got a large amount of money to go to Green Bay and be the special teams coach. So even if it doesn't lead to becoming a head coach, I do think it can, raise your income level by 50%. If you're making $800,000, you show you're a really impressive guy, people are going to want you to turn that thing into like $1.5 million. So you got a lot in the line. Nerves are high. He's the boss. Everyone answers to him. You have that first cup of coffee, your stomach starts rumbling, maybe throwing a little zinny, and all of a sudden you just blow up that bathroom. And the Superdome, have I ever been inside? I don't know if I've ever been to a game there. Maybe I've been in New Orleans a couple times. I don't know if I ever went for work when I was with the Eagles, but it's obviously an old building. You clog that toilet, and all of a sudden you think, this ain't going to be my day. But nothing a little plunger can't fix, and nothing a couple Derek Carr bombs to MVS can't fix, and all of a sudden you're a winner. So props on a day that he'll never forget, from clogging a toilet to beating the division-leading Atlanta Falcons. That's pretty cool. And the other story yesterday that just made me laugh, it's just pretty funny, is Jerry Jones and the sunlight that fires through Cowboy Stadium, AT&T Stadium. Obviously, everyone's just on Jerry's ass. Now, Jerry brings this upon himself, talks after every game. And there was a visual today right before I hopped on Monday afternoon of McCarthy giving his press conference at the Star, the Dallas, the super nice NASA level practice facility. And it's clearly, remember a couple weeks ago when they were making a big deal about the tours of the fans, you walk right in. So the front lobby, which I would imagine has enormous see-through glass doors, is right there, and so is the press room. So the sunlight is just firing through those front doors right into where McCarthy gives his press conference. And they have, I don't know exactly what it is, but they have something up blocking the sunlight so it doesn't blast him in the face today. And I'm sure they do it on every Monday when he talks. But Jerry was asked about the sunlight and obviously did not like the question and starts asking, like, what do you want me to do? Rip down the entire stadium? No, Jerry. This has been a pretty consistent theme here for a long time. Is there are plays for your team, and yesterday was pretty egregious, where the ball, it should have been an easy touchdown, and he cannot see because the sunlight is firing right in his two eyes. So whether it was Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, CeeDee Lamb, me, or you, we would have the same opportunity to catch a ball thrown our way. And I was reading yesterday on the internet that for concerts and other events at AT&T, they bring out some sort of window covering. So obviously you're not going to rip down the stadium, but this seems like a pretty easy solution. You have more money than God. Get something, even if it's just an electrical, put it above, comes down during the game. Now, you could argue from his standpoint, and this is what I would imagine the reason he doesn't want to do it, it does take a little bit away from the aesthetic of the place. It would not make it look as good. But is the balance of, taking away a little bit of the ambiance of the place, so a guy that you just paid $100 million to can catch a touchdown pass? I would say yes. And I think the Cowboys, I saw Rex Ryan today go on a rant about how Deion Sanders could be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. If you would have said that 2 months ago, I'd have said, you're high on drugs. I do think it's fair to say that has to be on the table now because Mike's going to get fired. This whole staff's going to get fired. And you go, who the hell is Jerry going to hire? You would have to think with Deion, with Shador, and Travis, who's essentially his son as well, going to the draft, that Deion would be very, very interested about coming to the Cowboys. And I think if you're Jerry, these next 2 months are going to be really ugly. Your team's terrible. Your team's injured. You have little to no chance of winning. I mean, Coward thought they were the worst team in the NFL. They'd have to be right up there right now. Hell, they barely beat the Giants a couple weeks ago when Dak was healthy. So I think that would give you life. And I think Deion now, if he wins out and is in the Big 12 championship, I do think there's no disputing that he's a really, really good coach. I had my question marks after last season, even after the Nebraska game, but I bet a decent amount of money on them on Saturday, and it was very enjoyable to watch. And honestly, I was like thinking they were going to get their ass kicked. They're down a couple scores right away, and they just come storming back. Him hiring Warren Sapp, their defensive line looks like a real college defensive line. I just think, listen, he's kind of made me a believer. Maybe Deion just has that secret sauce. And it's not like he's afraid to work. Started at Jackson State, went to Colorado. I mean, Colorado was a joke. It's been a joke most of my adult life. Programs, and he has them 3 straight. I mean, they win 3 more games. They're going to be favored in every one. He's in the Big 12 championship game. If I would have told that to everyone that covers college football at the beginning of the season, not a soul would have believed you. Not a soul. Even his biggest supporters That includes like the Shannon Sharps and the Terrell Owens. So how does he not get interviewed? How does he not get interviewed? And I do think he just is under the mold of like the style of coach that he is. He's really Dan Campbell, Harbaugh brothers. Like that's who you kind of get. And he knows and likes Jerry. And he kind of feels like bright lights after this year. Like, what else are they going to do? I mean, seriously, are they going to, Belichick's going to take that job? Doubt it. Now, you could argue, what do they do about the quarterback situation? I mean, who knows? They don't win a game the rest of the year. Are they drafting high enough to get Shador? Now, the problem is you just signed Dak. So now if you hire Dion, like, and he wants to draft Shador, just let him draft Shador. Now, maybe Shador's already off the board. Draft Travis Hunter if you're drafting like third. Draft one of the two of them and just play with Dak. So as crazy as it sounds, I do kind of think it's in play.